Dr. Graham Harding is a leading South African invasive species specialist with extensive experience in the ecology, management, and control of invasive plants. As founder and managing director of Invasive Plant Specialists, he is known for delivering practical, science-driven solutions to complex invasive plant challenges. Graham, please go ahead.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the introduction. You know who my company is and what we do. But just very briefly from my side, I've been in the industry for more years than I care to remember. My contact details, I'll show them again a bit later. And David is in the room. He's been with us for 17 years, and yes, he is my son. So the two of us work very extensively together in the field, and our web address is listed over there. I will put them back up at the end of the presentation. Quickly, what we do, invasive alien plant management plans. We've produced many of them, a couple of hundred possibly across South Africa. We do general invasive alien plant consulting. We do training across the board from beginner level to senior level of invasive species management. We do pest control operator training. That is a legal requirement in South Africa. Herbicide development trials for all the leading chemical companies. We do risk assessment, and we also do auditing of control operations. The strategy and action plan of Ugandan Wildlife Authority was shared with us last week, and we are very grateful that this document was shared, and it gave us a bit of a background on where to start and how to move forward with what could possibly be done. We looked at this quite critically, and I know I'm going to be standing on some toes, and I apologize for that up front, but sometimes it is good to stand on toes and say what maybe needs to be said. And I have touched on points of this with Caroline already. Is this a management plan? The answer there is no, it is not. It is a starting point, as it gives us an idea of what invasive alien plants and encroachers are in Uganda. One of the problems is that the plan needs direct actions. It states some ideals we want to reach, but it doesn't give us really a sense of where we need to be. And it needs to be backed up with management plans. And I am talking about management plans. So, So we'll stick on management planning. Now, Julie touched on alien plants, and these, as she said, are exotic. They come from another country, and in a nutshell, lack of natural enemies, they become a problem. Bush encroachers are indigenous, as Julie again said, and poor veld management, fire in one or other form, grazing in one or other form. In other words, too much or too little of either of these causes, or is one of the causes of bush encroachment. In management planning, we can lump these two together, but for purposes of reporting, we need to talk about invasive alien plants, and we need to talk about the bush encroachers. So we could have a management plan for the bush encroachers. It might include some of the invasive species at the same time, but we need to separate the two because they are very, very different drivers that cause what is very much the same end effect. The document also went on to state that climate change has impacted the extent of invasions in Uganda extensively. I disagree with that. Climate change will have an impact on invasive alien species. There's no two ways about it. I think it has been studied well enough. I think what Uganda has seen is that exponential growth phase. The invasive species, the bush encroachers were there, but they were low enough for them not to be noticed. And then they go through an exponential growth, and they suddenly explode and we see them. Climate change will add to that and make it more troublesome in the future. So what is a management plan? It's a roadmap for our reserves, our species, our area. Think about going on a road trip. A family member of mine rode down on a motorbike from the border of Tanzania and Zambia on possibly a 1980s BMW all the way down to Cape Town, via Joburg, Durban, Zimbabwe, Zambia, etc. He didn't just go to get on his motorbike. He had a plan. He knew where to put in fuel. He knew where to put in petrol. Sorry, the same thing. He knew where to sleep and he knew where to get food. That was his roadmap of where he was going. He had the fortunate level. He's a missionary, so he had the faith of God where he was going. And I think it helped him as well. What it's going to do, a management plan, is tell us why we are clearing, what to do, how are we going to go about clearing. The first one, why we are clearing. We can't just go and cut invasive species down for the fun of it. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and it's hard work. So we have to know why we're clearing. We want to know what we're going to do. The what to do might be where we're going to clear, when we're going to clear. We want to know how to do it, and then when to do it. Different species have different times of when to clear them. So we have to take that into account of how we're going to go about our clearing program. The management plan is the key point of any clearing operation. It's a step-by-step guide to invasive alien planting and encroachment management. It includes all methods, and this is a stumbling block. It was discussed in a small meeting last week. If we're only going to, and it was mentioned this morning, if we're going to go in and only use mechanical, and mechanical, I combine manual and machines to try and control these plants, we are not going to win. And I'll cover that in a little bit later. So we've got methods that I'll cover. We need to include all of them. We need to include the costs. And this is expensive. How much is it going to cost to clear? Timelines. When are we going to clear what and in what time? But this is an open-ended timeline. Management is going to carry on for as long as we're working on that piece of land, as long as it is our responsibility. The management plan is also a reference tool for measuring progress. It's a starting point. We've got so many invasive alien plants. We do a map, we determine the densities, we determine the species, and that's our starting point. In a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, whatever, we can go back and measure how we've succeeded. There's some good stories of management plans working. There's some stories, horror stories, where millions of rands or dollars have gone into clearing and we've had no progress. So a management plan must have goals, and South Africa put out a document on how to do a management plan that matches very clearly and closely with what we've always done. It must be specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time-bound. In other words, using the old acronym SMART. So specific, what are we controlling? We can't send people out into the field just to go and cut trees down. What are we going to control? If I come back briefly to the one question of we put in a fence line and we open up a pathway for invasive species. If we put in a fence line through Dicrostachys, because it is a root suckering plant, it is going to produce root suckers along that fence line. We must know that, and our plan for that fence line must have the mitigating features to solve that problem. Measurable, how much are we going to do? We always want to do a lot of work, but we've got to be realistic, which comes down to the fourth point. We've got to say who is going to do the work. If we go through the old school telephone directory, there is no entry for who or you or someone. It must be assigned to a senior manager. It must be assigned to a team in the field, and the team in the field must have a responsible person. So we know who is going to do the work. That detail hasn't got to be in the management plan, but it must be assigned, the work must be assigned to someone. It must be realistic. We're going to solve Ugandan problems in their 6 reserves or protected areas in the next 10 years, which the plan suggests. It's unachievable. We are not going to get there. It's not possible. South Africa has been working on prickly pear. I think biocontrol was possibly released in 1940. Chemical control was done on prickly pear through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Has prickly pear been solved? It's been reduced, but it is still with us. I've got a farmer friend who was clearing the Sellar tussock on his land. We started work with him in 1984. His son has now taken over the farm because he's retired. His son is still doing maintenance. It's an ongoing process. So as you do one level of control, we're adding on to it as we move on. I'll come into that shortly. And then it's going to be time bound. When are we going to do it? Are we going to finish by, we're going to do the first set of work within 2 years, within 3 years? When are we going to go back and do the work? We'll talk about that very shortly. So this is the basis of a management plan. Specific, what's going to be done, how much we're going to do it, who's going to do it, is it achievable or make it achievable, and then time bound. And remember, if you haven't cut trees down yourself in the field, especially something like Dicrostachys, it is hard work. Uganda is pretty much on the equator. It's hot work. So think of the people in the field who are doing the work. The plan must make recommendations. So methods, and I'm going to say them all, chemicals have to be included. Something has to be done or needs to be done to solve a problem in Uganda to convince the authorities that chemicals are part of the operation. We can do cut stump, we can do foliar. Dicrostachys is controlled exceptionally well with foliar herbicides. Biocontrol is one of the tools. Biocontrol will not solve the problem on its own. Chemicals will not solve the problem on its own. So we need to work all the methods and mechanical and put in an integrated management plan that combines all the methods together. Herbicides, if you recommend a herbicide, it must have its name, its rate, and its application method and application rates. And the plan is a long-term operation. And then part of the plan is monitoring. How often must you go back? How often must you look at what's been done, see the results, and then, if necessary, modify the plan for new developments, modify the plan for things that have not worked in your operations. We have stages of control that will be recorded in an invasive alien or problem plant control program. The initial control. This is the first time we go in, and in some places in Uganda, we've gone in already with mechanical and manual control. If we're going to do a management plan, we want to put into that plan that an initial manual and or initial mechanical followed by a follow-up manual was done with not that good results. We now need a follow-up. And one of the questions that came up in the chat was about what do you do for follow-up on Dicrostachys. When it's been dug out, you're going to have a lot of root suckering coming up. So follow-up with the only solution there is a chemical. Otherwise, we're going to cause more roots to sucker. A follow-up in Uganda due to the climate is going to be roughly every 6 months. How long do you carry on with follow-ups? Until that density has declined to a manageable level. What is a manageable level? Each site will be dependent on itself, on the nature of the invasive species and the success of the control operations. Once you get to a manageable level, maybe 10% of the original infestation, we then go into maintenance. Maintenance might include monitoring the biocontrol agents. It'll be monitoring the density of the plants, new occurrences, changes in the felt situation, etc. And then the maintenance carries on for as long as we're around. The plan would get passed on to next generation of managers, and they would carry on with the management and monitoring of the site. This is just a picture, and I want you to look at, sorry, bad statement saying it's just a picture. I want you to look at the left-hand side here. We can see a fence line, and we see dense vegetation here, and we see a grassland in the front. I've seen this area, heard it talked about, and we've had a look at it. And what this picture shows, the area shows two different approaches and what these approaches have on the impact of the veld. The owner on the left has overgrazed. They've cleared property. The right side has removed invasives, but they've managed the property management successfully. And they've had an active rehabilitation program. The foreground belongs to the farmer on the right, just showing that you can still have proper management. You've still got dense vegetation in the back. You've got grassland in the veld. You've got browsing up there for your browsers. You've got grazing here for the grazers. On the left, this farmer has got an arid desert mountain slope. So proper management, we can get what we need for our purposes. What is the benefit of a management plan? Everyone knows what is needed. And David put this slide together. He put it down from the person cutting the trees to finance department. Now, it's interesting is that this is exactly what Kenya does. They work from the bottom up. And David said the management plan tells the person on the bottom what the person on the ground, let's not say the bottom, the person on the ground to the top management, what is needed. Finance needs a buy-in. The person on the ground needs to agree, is this management plan feasible? Can I do that work in the time allocated? And there needs to be discussion and movement from both parties to get this right. The project has clear and defined goals and timelines. We are going to clear 10 hectares of dicrostachys using foliar application, followed up with spot spray in the next 2 years. Our application will be on this date. We'll have follow-ups every year, and then we'll monitor it and see where we go. How and when plants get cut down or treated, we know when it's going to be treated. Our finance department can make sure the budget is there and available. People who might have to go and find funds, and a lot of Africa is funded from international organizations. When do we need to get that fund sorted out? There's been a lot of discussion about use of the biomass. I would suggest using the biomass. We might have skills development, we might offset costs, but use of the biomass, as has been said, will not control the invasive alien species. The aim must be to cut them down, and then you use what is left over for any purposes. And Uganda has been doing this. They've been letting the people go in and cut the trees down and use it for timber and firewood, etc. That's fine. But they've got to be discouraged from replanting. In fact, stopped from replanting. The use of biomass is a significant part of any control operation. This is an outline of a farm. Don't worry about where it is, etc. This is the sort of thing we would do. We'd map an area, and the outside line is just the property concerned, and then broken down into what our Working for Water program calls NBELs. We might call them vegetation management areas. Doesn't matter what you call them, blocks, units, etc. And they're not, as you see, all equal size. They're broken down into roughly 21 days worth of clearing. And we use that to build up our clearing program. Management would have to tell us and discuss with us what are the most important parts to clear. We might want to clear roadsides. We might want to clear pathways for game to move from point A to point B. We might want to clear water holes. So a management plan hasn't got to go out and clear the whole property at once. It clears priority areas as required with the aim of clearing this whole property in a given time. We would then draw up a table with different areas broken down into areas. We just said a fire break, a VMA1, a fire break, lower and upper area. Species in this case don't matter, but we use Acacia saligna and Penicillium, Port Jackson and fountain grass. And we said the age class is seedling and mature, because how you handle a Port Jackson seedling is different to how you would handle a Port Jackson adult. And we've had a problem in South Africa, sort of diverge a little bit there. Biocontrol in the form of a fungus has worked incredibly well in our Western Cape province, mostly in the slightly drier areas. But without a management plan in place, authorities are going in and cutting all the trees down with the fungus. We're now removing the fungus, which then has to re-establish, and the trees have got nothing, no biocontrol. So very often we'd say to people, leave the mature trees. The biocontrol is working. Go and tackle the seedlings. And this could very well be the case of this one. We're only looking at the seedlings, and the density we say is 0.1%. That's an art in itself, determining the density. And then we would say how many days it would take to clear that. And this could get built up, the region, and we put costs to that, and would then come up with a management plan that can be put forward and out into the field. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment of South Africa, DFFE, oversees management in South Africa. And they put out this document, Monitoring and Control Operations and Eradication Plans for South Africa. If anybody wants it, I can share it with you. Please just ask me. I'm not putting it out publicly at this stage. And it publishes the guidelines for invasive alien plant management. Now, the fact that DFFE put this out and they manage invasive alien plants in the form of our Working for Water program, which has been running for 34 years, if I have my figures updated completely. In 34 years, we've got some very good success stories, and we've got some very bad success stories, or poor success stories. Are we on top of invasive alien plants in South Africa? The question very definitely is no. We're not. We're a long way from getting there. So 10 years for for Uganda is unfortunately not on. Just two key weeds I want to just touch on very briefly, and a management plan for either one of them. Parthenium estrophorus is toxic to humans. If we send people in there to go and manually chop them out, we have a problem. It needs a rapid response. What method are you going to apply? I would strongly recommend initial work as a herbicide. I was in the Serengeti a couple of years ago, and you know how the puddle jumper planes go from landing strip to landing strip. The landing strip in Tanzania was heavily infested with Parthenium, being taken by plane from landing strip to landing strip. No one bothering to do anything, take out a can of herbicide, spray those little seedlings that are coming up, and we will end up limiting the spread. So there's a rapid response, needs to do something like that. Biochemical control can be brought in at a later date should the plants become a major problem. Dicrostachys, as we know, it's an indigenous coppicing and root suckering species. This tells me straight off that we cannot use manual control. It needs chemicals. The best advice I would give Uganda Wildlife Authority at this stage is step away from any of your indigenous species that coppice, don't cut them down, and don't dig them out. You're only making the problem worse. And there are chemicals that can be used safely. So with that, I'm popping across briefly to chemicals. And herbicides are an integral part of a control operation, but we need to understand how they work, or understand the product. So understand how it works. Understand its toxicity to the operator. So in other words, I've got a knapsack on my back. I'm in a helicopter spraying herbicide. What is that herbicide going to do to me? I'm a villager in the vicinity. You spray the herbicide. What's it going to do to me? What's it going to do to my animals? What's it going to do to the wildlife? And remember, we can fence, in some cases, not all of Uganda, we can fence the domestic stock. We can't fence the wildlife. What is the toxicity to the target plant? How quickly will it kill it and how effectively? And what's the toxicity to non-target plants? What is the environmental fate? Where does the herbicide go? My last line on that says, read the label. All of the above is reported by the chemical company who develops the product. The environmental department of the US is very, very strong in gathering all of this data. All the countries, South Africa's got all of this available for every single herbicide. So we can tell you how it works, how toxic it is for the operator, what precautions need to be taken, same for animals, same for target and non-target plants, and for the environmental fate. So that information is known and it is on the herbicide label. Just a little quick break in pictures. We've got on the left a plant that has just been sprayed with herbicide. This is 25 days later, we can see the curling of the leaf, and then another 10 days later or so, 20 days later, the plant is dead. So we've got a level of monitor. We can see it's been sprayed, we can see the impact, and we can see the plant has died. This is treating pine trees in a pine invasion. These trees have been treated individually, yet these trees around them are not impacted by herbicides. Our Kruger National Park, or in fact all our national parks, just a note to the Ugandan Wildlife Authority, all our national parks use biocontrol, they use chemicals extensively. Kruger Park has got a very good research unit under Llewellyn Foxcroft, who reports regularly in scientific papers on control of invasive species in the Kruger Park. They used successfully with not any damage to the wildlife or the biodiversity. So what is the current status? The problem plants have been listed. They need to be mapped a bit more in Uganda. Priority areas have been identified, in other words, the national parks and the areas surrounding them. We would need to handle those separately. There needs to be an outcomes-based approach to plant control. What is going to be done where and when? The budget needs to be looked at. Available resources, people, equipment, downstream use of biomass, etc. What is available in Uganda? And I would like to see this opened up. What is available in Africa? Because being a landlocked country, what happens in your bordering countries impacts you as well. And then rehabilitation of areas as we work. So in conclusion, we need to have a proper plan before commencing any control projects. I'm very, very strong on that. Invasive species aren't new. Build on existing knowledge in your country. There are people who know a lot about them already. Don't rely on one method, and make sure everyone involved knows their role. So thank you for the time. I'm within my time, and there again are our contact details. Thank you, everybody. Any questions?
Well done. Well done, Graham. Thank you for keeping in your time. That's super. And you have laid out very effectively for us, both by responding to the Uganda Wildlife Authority's strategy document, but also taking very effective steps, one step at a time, to make it less, more manageable. So yes, fantastic, Graham. Thank you so much. I see a chat from Patrick Ndunga. Great presentation, Mr. Graham. And I'm waiting to see if there are any questions in the chat. Let me just see here. Yeah, so far just from Patrick. Would anybody like to raise their virtual hands to ask Graham a question? Johan, go for it.
Thanks, Graham. Graham, I would like to ask, if you have an isolated piece of land invaded by whatever species, it's fairly easy to set your goals, say it's a riverbed or whatever. But if you're working on a few thousand hectares that has been invaded by a species, how do you set your goals for that?
We're going to prioritize based on management requirements. You might, as I mentioned, you might have water holes that need clearing. You might have key points for tourists. You'll have hotspots of invasion themselves, depending on the type of invasion. You would possibly start those hotspots using chemicals, and if possible, bring in your biocontrol agents. So, for example, something like lantana. Biocontrol in Kenya would be a long-term process with lantana. Chemicals, we can do very good work in a very short time. So for those remote areas where there's no one getting to see them, where it might be limited at this stage, you might leave that for biocontrol. It depends on the situation. One of the mistakes that everybody makes is they jump in and do the dense areas first and leave the scattered areas last. We want to do the scattered areas. I'm contradicting myself, but we might want to do the scattered areas first because they will only get worse. The dense areas aren't going to get worse. But Johan, to give you a precise answer, it depends on the area, depends on what is required.
Okay.
But break it down into manageable sections.
Thank you.
Thanks, Johan. Graham, I see that there's a comment from Caroline, which is really a nice comment. She says, thank you, Graham. That was a good analysis of the Ugandan Wildlife Authority invasive strategy. She asks if you could help them with the names of chemicals that are being used in South Africa for invasive plant species management. So that's a nice openness to looking at the possibility of chemical management. And then I have a question from Sianda Shabalala for Graham and for Julie. Can we use nanotechnology in invasive alien plants species management to inhibit a specific trait for it to grow? Of course, under trials in a controlled environment, example, soil properties, water, and other factors. And is this possible for a PhD study? Okay, that sounds wonderfully ambitious and great. Graham, would you like to answer that question?
Okay, I see two. I want to come back and comment on Carol first, and there's another one very related by Philemon on what chemicals for Parthenium and Lichrostachys. I'm somewhat averse to, on a public platform, just to say go and use these chemicals. In South Africa, a pest control operator has a licensed person makes recommendations, and we want to see what the area looks like, what it is. For example, if I tell you what herbicide to use for Parthenium and you go and use it in the wrong area, you could damage your irrigation water, for example. I'm happy to answer those questions, but I would do it personally to those organizations, in other words, Uganda Wildlife Authority, and I'm not sure who Philemon is from, but I will chat to you on the side, Philemon. Nanotechnology, that's out of my scope. I think that's a long way, but I think it's a long way down the line. Maybe Julie would like to comment on that.
I've just typed him an email, by the way, a private message. It's going to be a bit too much to describe in this session.
Thanks, David. Okay, super. I have a Dorothy Kirumiro. I see that you have a couple of questions. Dorothy, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the questions?
Thank you, Christine. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Graham, for the insightful presentation. Thank you, Julie, as well. I've been following, and particularly on chemicals. I see the sprayed plants dried, which is a very good thing. But I'm wondering, as if the ground around or the soils around those plants look dry, what is the fate of grass or the plants around? Because we have weeding chemicals in Uganda right now. They are selective, though, of course, we're just beginning to use them. Personally, I'm not quite so sure about what will happen after so many years. But they're said to be selective. For example, if you want to take out a weed from a bean garden, they will only kill the weed and spare the beans. The beans will grow so well. So are these chemicals selective as well? I got worried when I saw from the two photos that the ground was looking dry and bare. So I'm wondering, when we kill the invasives, do other plants, especially particularly the grasses, survive? And for example, if we have diclostachys mixed up with other plants, because for example, like here in Kibale National Park, you find a few plants in the middle of the forest. Will the chemicals particularly select one like the diclostachys, or particularly what is it targets, or chances are high that the plants closest to the targeted plant species will die? Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. It's a long question and quite difficult to answer. The dryness of that in that one picture, that wasn't through herbicides, that was overgrazing and damage in general. On selectivity of herbicides, and I don't want to take away too much from tomorrow, but a herbicide that's being used is selective for thorn trees. In other words, it kills the thorn trees, and it does not kill the trees that do not have thorns. This sounds crazy, but there's something in the physiology of the plants that the herbicide works on one group and not the other group. So selectivity is a long discussion all on its own, where it's plant physiology, it's time of application, it's amount of herbicide, because remember, it's poison is in the dose. If we don't apply it correctly, we will kill everything. But we apply correctly under proper conditions, we can selectively manage invasive species. And then we can also do it by using cut stump and only applying to that stump of the tree, and which then won't impact on the trees around it. So Dorothy, it is possible, but it's a long discussion.
Thanks, Dorothy. Thanks, Graham. Right, do we have any more questions for Graham?
I see one from Dorothy. How long does a herbicide stay in the soil?
Oh, yes.
That breakdown pattern is known for all herbicides and depends on the soil structures and the environment of the soil. It's being well studied, and it is known for all the herbicides and how they break down and what their breakdown products are.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, we definitely are going to go deeper into this tomorrow during our session on chemical control.